You're listening to the Weekend Sport Podcast with Jason Pine from News Talk ZB.
Sunny Sunday in the capital. Hope it's nice where you are. Round 10 of Super Rugby is in the books.
Now for Thompson, the debutant, looking to link up for Caleb Clark. Clark down the left wing. Clark for the 22. Back in field. The match winner. Sam Knock scores the winner for the Blues. 39-34, kick to come. Forget about the conversion. Sam Knox won the game, and the Blues will take it.
They have. The Blues have snatched a 41-34 win over the Reds, thanks to that try to replacement halfback Sam Knock. Final play of the game, the Blues overcoming a 31-20 deficit with 15 minutes to play. They remain second on the Super Rugby ladder now, though, just 1 point behind the Hurricanes, who suffered their first loss of the season.
They're counting down the clock. Famous win for the Brumbies. There's the hoodah. Back to Lolosio, who bangs it into the grandstand. Look at the euphoria on Lolosio's face. 27-19.
Yeah, so a couple of very, very interesting games of rugby yesterday. The voice you heard calling the Blues game on Gold Sport, of course, was our rugby editor and lead commentator, Elliott Smith, who joins us now. Afternoon, Elliott. Are the Blues now Super Rugby favourites?
Afternoon, Piney. Look, I probably wouldn't go as far as that just yet, but certainly they're finding ways to win. The last 4 or 5 weeks, they've won comfortably, picked up some really convincing wins. Last night, they had a team that put them to the sword a little bit, and it looked like the game was gone. They slipped down to 11-point lead late on, and it felt like the Reds had the ascendancy, but the Blues, never say die attitude, found their way back into the contest, and then just as it looked as though we were heading to Golden Point, managed to ice it in regulation. So I still think the Hurricanes are perhaps the more well-rounded of the teams, but I do not think there is much between them. We saw them play, about a month and a half ago now, and there wasn't much on that night. The Blues perhaps erred with a couple of selections on that evening. They're due to play again a fortnight yesterday, so that's going to be a compelling watch. But I don't think there's much between them, but I'd still give the edge to the Hurricanes.
Can you see Vern Cotter's fingerprints on this Blues side?
100%, yeah. This is a Blues team that is forged in the forward pack, which it feels funny to say for the Blues because that's been their letdown in recent times. They've had some talent there, sure, but they haven't been able to work as a cohesive unit. What we've seen throughout the last few weeks is really using their forward play as a weapon, their set piece as a weapon, not afraid to steal lineouts, not afraid to attack the opposition at lineout and also at scrum time. And that's where the Blues have been certainly let down, in the last few years. Think back to that Super Rugby final of 2022 where the Crusaders had a field day stealing their lineout. It's been an issue for them. This year it's turned into a real strength of them. Last night we saw Angus Ta'avao toy with former Blues prop Alex Hodgman at scrum time, win a couple of penalties there. They stole 3 lineouts. They did it last week against the Brumbies as well at Eden Park. So it's built on their forward pack, and then you've got that back line featuring, Mark Talia, Caleb Clark, Rico Ioane, that can work off some quality balls. So it's all really humming along for the Blues on the back of that forward pack, which hasn't always been the case. Sometimes those backs have had to live off scraps. Certainly not the case this year. So
that's 6 on the trot now for the Blues. Now, you and I were at Eden Park a week or so ago watching the Blues dismantle the Brumbies 46-7. And to be fair, the Brumbies were pretty average that night. How can they go from that to a team who beats the Hurricanes, who hadn't lost all season?
Yeah, remarkable. No, it didn't pick this turnaround at all, but the Brumbies went back to the basics of Brumbies rugby. They used their forward pack, as I said, the Blues did very, very well over the last few weeks. The Brumbies did that well, were physical where they weren't last week. They just weren't simply at the races at Eden Park against the Blues. They really tightened that up last night. They missed 17 tackles. The Hurricanes, on the other hand, missed 43, which is a big discrepancy between the two. The Hurricanes really, I thought, looked off for most of that game, even though when they got back to 8 points in the second half, I had a sense that they were going to take the game, but they just couldn't find a way past that Brumbies defence. And what they did really well last evening was they had Noah Lolosio, but he was helped out big time, I thought, by Tom Wright at fullback with some smart kicking, smart interventions with ball in hand, where he simply didn't have that support last week. I actually had to go back and double check that Tom Wright played that game against the Blues at Eden Park because he wasn't a feature in that game. He got a lot of help last night, Noah Lolesio, and that made a world of difference. So that was where the Brumbies were able to set up that win and perhaps push that physicality that the Hurricanes just hadn't had against them in a few weeks, perhaps since that Blues game back at Sky Stadium.
And even though the Brumbies were the only Australian side to beat a New Zealand side over the weekend, we've talked about the Blues and how they left it late. The Highlanders only beat the Force 7-6. What a thriller that was. The Waratahs going down to the Chiefs, the Rebels, not much chop against the Crusaders. The table doesn't lie, Elliott. There are now 3 Australian sides in the top 6, along with 3 New Zealand sides. Do we need to reassess our view on the strength of the Australian Super Rugby sides?
I think we do. Look, the Reds last night were within 5 minutes of beating the Blues, and that would have been the Brumbies and the Reds beating the top 2 teams in the competition, both New Zealand sides on the same day, and probably that's cause for a public holiday. If you're the Australian Prime Minister, you'd be getting on the phone and saying, can we take the day off? We've done so well here. Let's give ourselves a public holiday. As that happened, the Blues fought back, but they've actually really closed the gap this year, I think, on the New Zealand sides. You look at the table, the Melbourne Rebels got dusted up on Friday night, but they're in the top 8 as it stands. The Reds are a very, very different beast at home. Yes, they lost last night, but we saw them beat the Highlanders convincingly last week. On the road, they're a different proposition. They lost to Moana Pacifica a couple of weeks ago. Interesting to see how they go against the Crusaders next week. The Brumbies, they're difficult to beat at home in Canberra, as the Hurricanes discovered yesterday. So travelling, perhaps not necessarily a strength for these Australian teams at the moment, but certainly when you go and play even the Waratahs at home in Sydney, the Western Force in Perth, Canberra, etc., etc., when you go and play them on their home turf, these Australian teams are better. So the table, as you said, Piney, doesn't lie, and they've certainly improved over the course of the season. Whether it makes a difference when we get to the pointy of the season and the playoffs remains to be seen. But this competition is thrilling from week to week at the moment. It's certainly a much improved product on recent years. Indeed.
I've just got one more question, and that's about the Chiefs. I don't even know how I feel about the Chiefs. How should we feel about the Chiefs?
It's a weird one, isn't it? I still don't think they've put together an 80-minute performance this season against the quality opposition. They dipped down to a 12-0 deficit early on Friday night against the Waratahs, then surged back, and it really was a comfortable win in the end. The Hurricanes a couple of weeks ago, they had them almost on the rack, you'd say, at Sky Stadium with the early second half advantage, and then the Hurricanes tore through them in the last 20 minutes. It's either the first 20 or the last 20. The Chiefs just haven't seemed to get right this season. If they can find that, then they're a dangerous proposition. But we're all talking about the Blues and the Hurricanes. The Chiefs are still sitting there. They're in, as it stands, a home playoff position, or at least for the first week. But it feels like they haven't really hit top gear as yet. Whether they'll find that remains to be seen. They've got a relatively easy run home. They've got the Force at home next week, Moana away, and then the Rebels to come after that. That's a pretty soft run to the playoffs, and then the Hurricanes and Blues to finish in the final 2 rounds. So if any team is going to be playoff ready, well, it's probably the Chiefs, because they'll be steeled with those 2 games that they have to finish the regular season. But it feels like they haven't hit full tilt as yet, and Clayton McMillan with a bit of work to do, I think, around just making sure this team is playing for the full 80 minutes this season.
All right, Elliott. Great to get your analysis. Thanks indeed. Elliott Smith, our rugby editor and lead commentator. Looking ahead to round 11 of Super Rugby next weekend. Hurricanes Waratahs kick us off Friday night at Sky Stadium. Then the Rebels host the Blues on Saturday. Moana Pacifica against the Highlanders. That game is in Nuku'alofa. So the Highlanders with a journey up into the Pacific Islands. The Crusaders host the Reds. Chiefs, Force and Brumbies, Fiji and Drua.
For more from Weekend Sport with Jason Pine, listen live to News Talk ZB weekends from midday, or follow the podcast on iHeartRadio.